your host, Tommy West. Joining me as always is my co-host, Alana's Maximus, and we are joined by a very, very special guest today, Frankie Frain from Red Cow Arcade.
All the way on the other side of the globe.
Yeah,
definitely.
Other side of the pond.
It's 9 p.m. here. What time is it there?
It's 11 o'clock a.m.
Saturday. So we're in the future.
It's like time travel, yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I visited Australia one time.
Yeah, I actually heard you say that in an episode or something. And how'd you find it?
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions about it actually. So I was invited to, or I got into the Sydney Underground Film Festival. I remember I submitted my third feature, Sex with Frank. This is in 2012. I don't remember why or how I submitted to the festival. I think I was just like shotgunning. I was submitting to lots of festivals, and because this was before. I don't even know. To be honest with you, I don't even know if film festivals still exist or if they're important or if people attend them.
No, they definitely are down here. They definitely are down here. I did film school as well, yeah. So I went to SAE Film School in Melbourne, and there's always film festivals going on. So yeah, they're pretty important.
I used to love them. I mean, it was really a blast. But I submitted to a bunch, and then I remember getting like kind of like a plain text, almost like it felt like a soliciting, like kind of like scam email or something. It was like, you got into Sydney, and if you'd like to come to Sydney, here's how to get to Sydney. And I was like, am I going to go to Sydney? Yeah, it was before I had a child. And I was like, yeah, why not? And then I encouraged one of my actors who is such a homebody. I mean, he is not a traveler, this guy. And I was like, hey, do you want to not only go to Australia with me? Do you want to go for like 3 days? Because I think we had, it was the only thing we could fit into our schedule. So it was like a $1,200 round trip or something like that.
That's actually not too bad at all.
Yeah, it wasn't too terrible. And it was Coach, and I met, it's like you have the 3 seats, and I stuck him in the middle, and so I got the aisle, and yeah, I remember like it was from Massachusetts to Los Angeles, so just first you have to fly across the United States. That's like 6 hours, no big deal. It's that last 18 hours that I've never start to go insane.
I can imagine, man. I can imagine.
One eye starts to kind of bloat, and you start to forget. You certainly forget what time it is. It really does feel like you like go through another dimension and you finally get there. And I remember when I arrived, there was like a film student that was assigned to us. They're like, go pick up the Red Cow guys. And she was very nice. I don't remember her name, but I'm Facebook friends with her to this day. And I remember her fragrance, and then the entire city's fragrance was eucalyptus and tea tree oil. The whole place smelled like that. Does it smell that way out in Melbourne too?
No, it kind of smells like smog and homeless people. No, I don't know.
I mean, there was a guy named Doodleburger who was from Melbourne who came in for the festival, and his whole thing was there was some sitcom you guys have called like, what the fuck is it? It was some dad or something. And
Hey Dad?
What is it?
Hey Dad?
Maybe. He dubbed over some sitcom that is very popular out there that I don't know about. And he made this dad be like, "Oh, you cunts." That's all he really did was he made the dad be like, "Oh, you cunts." And then and this was the big deal. Like they were booking Doodleburger was like the big marquee name. They're like, we're gonna get Doodleburger from YouTube. He's gonna screen. And then like we were in the same car getting shuttled to the festival. And I remember everything was cunt, including we had to like. I remember they asked us like, "Hey, can you give us a hand like moving this like giant poster or something?" And he said, "Oi, mate. Get the other side and then cunt it out this way, and then we're gonna cunt it out. You can cunt it towards me, right?" And
that's the thing, man. Over here, that's the way you can tell if an Australian likes you. They call you cunt. If they're unhappy with you, they call you mate.
And I remember we like the two of us. They brought us over to the University of Sydney, and they said like you can sleep in this dorm room because we needed to sleep, and so they stuck us in like a weird prison room. And I remember I was like, I think I gotta like go take a walk. And I went outside and I started wandering like I was like really jet lagged. And natural inclination to say hello to strangers. So like somebody was passing me with their dog, and I said hello, and they went good day. You know, it's like really super Australian. I was like, holy fuck, I'm in Australia. Kevin! Kevin! Good day. Might as well have been like a CG kangaroo. It was like, hello.
I'm stoked that you came on, man. I'm really stoked that you came on and gave us a shot because I watch your content like constantly. I watch you.
Oh.
I watch Sacred Symbols with Colin Moriarty from IGN. I don't know if you. I'm sure you're aware of the kind. He's
I know what IGN is.
IGN is a video game site.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Colin is the 20. He was the PlayStation, like the head of PlayStation, like they're doing the like main articles. He was on Podcast Beyond with Greg Miller. He was on all that. So then he went and did Kind of Funny, and then he got booted from Kind of Funny, and he was on Joe Rogan and things like that because of that.
Oh, wow.
And then he started his own company called Sacred Symbols, and now they do PlayStation podcast as well as like a thing called Not Back, which is like retro and nostalgic stuff. You know what I mean? And so I mainly watch them. I watch you. And there's a few other notable ones too, but like I absolutely love you and EJ's content on YouTube. You have me like
kind of see the Cinemassacre craziness.
Yeah, dude. I love James Rolfe. I've always loved him, but I do agree with a lot of what you've said in the past.
I love him too, by the way.
I know you guys do. That's where it comes from for you guys, yeah. Which is like a place of love for that dude, yeah. So
I think so. Yeah. I mean, to this day, I like if somebody were to pop on Cinemassacre 200 or something, I'd be like, I'm gonna watch this. I'm super. You know, like, the thing is like I think that he represents a certain age. Like, are you guys around my age? Like, I'm 37.
Yeah, I'm 35.
I'm 40 next month.
Well, get the fuck out of here. No. Yeah, like we're right in that kind of that late millennial thing where, like, if you're young enough, you were doing tape to tape, but you were also kind of on the bleeding edge of like digital editing. Or like the one that I always point to is we're still the type. Like, you went to film school. We're still the types to think of what we're doing as filmmaking whenever all the youngins think of it as content. So much so, like a meme to make fun of him, like when he calls things his films and stuff. And I get it; it's a little excessive to call a video review a film, but I share a lot of his sensibilities actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that we always thought was interesting was like, what happens when 15 years passes and you're no longer like your heart's not in it and your heart's in your family instead, and like what is the end of this whole thing? Like, you know, because my hope for myself creatively is that I'll always be able to kind of leapfrog to the next cool thing. So, you know, because I have to have a life beyond my child, right? Like I can't. She is my life, sure, and like she's crucial.
Gloria is her name, isn't it? Gloria is your daughter's name, yes.
Yeah, Gloria. Yep.
Yeah, she seems very funny with what you've said on podcast. And hey, you guys just went and saw The Little Mermaid, and she was like, "Can we get out of here, please?"
Fuck out of here. Yeah, she's great. She's hilarious. The other morning we woke up, and the thing about children is they don't say good morning. They don't. There's no greeting. They greet you with a non sequitur. And we woke up, and she goes, "I think I need a pocket watch." And my wife goes, you know, she's like half asleep. She goes, "A pocket watch?" And Gloria goes, "A pocket watch." And that's how the morning starts.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, kids are great. I've got my own son. He's 10 years old.
Nice.
And like he's great because he's like all about movies. Yeah. So like he likes the ins and outs of how they're made and things like that. Because I went to film school, so I'm teaching him. I'm like, that's a green screen.
Oh, that's so good.
That's this, you know. So when he watches things that are a bit more adult than he should be watching or whatever, he's fine with it because he gets the whole thing to it. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, that's not real.
Like, how do they do that special effect, Dad?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I've tried to like instill to him from the day, which is that like this is all make believe. So anything that's like a little bit more adult than it should be, you should be able to handle it because you know it's all fake. None of this is real. You know what I mean? So, and some people look at me as like, you know, an irresponsible dad for doing things like that. But I honestly think that's the opposite. I think it's responsible to teach them that this is how it's done. This is how you should look at it. And it's more of an art than it is something scary. You know what I mean?
I think it's probably more that the average person would be incapable of making it accessible to your son. So the default is let's not show them horrific things. But if you're actually able to like set context and be like, look, movies, there's only a few ways to make movies, and there's only if you can crack the code for them where they can kind of spot a special effect and understand. And then I think it's challenging probably to explain, like, so why would I want to watch somebody get dismembered, or why would I want to watch gruesome violence, or filmmakers like Tarantino to this day struggle to answer that. He continues to be grilled for like, so why all the violence though? Seriously, and he's kind of at a point where he's like, stop asking me. I don't know. It's pop and it's it's comedy and it's drama and it's visceral, and it's almost like it's impossible to, if you don't get it, you don't get it. If you know, as the children would say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my son's mum always says things like, you shouldn't be letting him see like Jurassic Park. And I'm like, it's Jurassic Park, first off. I saw that when I was in primary school. Kindergarten, I saw that in, I have no problems with swearing in front of my child or like that sort of stuff, because he's so responsible with it that he knows, he gets it. He's like, I know that it's different in art, it's different in music, because it's conveying a feeling, it's conveying an emotion. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so when I'm like to him, do you swear at school? He's like, no, when kids at school swear, I tell them they shouldn't do that. You know what I mean? So he'll watch, I'll show him like little clips, not the whole thing, because he's not quite ready for a lot of it, but I'll show him little clips from like Workaholics or something like that are hilarious, that I know is okay for him. You know what I mean? Just like silly ones where they're like trying to save Durs from getting taken by that dude, and he flips out of the back of the car, and it just looks hilarious. You know what I mean? And he thinks that stuff's hilarious. So
we just did Guardians 3. She had seen 1 and 2, and I wasn't, I saw the movie in theaters, and I wasn't so sure about showing it to her because of the rocket stuff mostly.
Yeah, very sad, very sad, very sad.
Yeah, and they James Gunn does an excellent job of attaching kind of emotion to it in a way, so that might settle in her heart in a way that kind of haunts her. And so I don't want that. So we talked about it a lot in advance. And as it turned out, those scenes she was fine with. She knew they were coming. What's surprising with kids? What surprised was, the planet they go to that's kind of like farting and belching, and it's like made out of like skin and stuff. She was nauseated by this thing. She just couldn't stick. Yeah, she just found and that skin planet reminded me a lot of Michael Rooker's character in Slither. The monster that he turns into. It's kind of has like a James Gunn fleshy aesthetic to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Alanis here is our residential Marvel fan. He loves Marvel. He's a Marvel craze.
Even still.
Yeah. I kind of, the MCU, because I've always been into the comic books and stuff as well, and
sure,
there's always dips, and there's always there's going to be something better afterwards kind of thing. So I think, to me, the MCU is kind of like what I always wanted as a kid. I was like, fuck, this would be cool if we had it as like an interconnected movie series. So some stuff's kind of take it or leave it, but I'm still digging it. I'm kind of excited.
Well, that's good. I don't get it, but I feel like after Endgame, I think like everybody went their separate ways, and only untalented people remain. And we're going on like 4 years of, I think like 90% misses for me.
Oh wow! Yeah, I think I don't know. I think it is kind of lulled a little bit, but I think it's almost a transitional point, because you've kind of had the big Avengers, and you've kind of got these characters like even the villain Kang, not many people know much about. But now kind of they're going to move on to like X-Men and things like that. So I think it'll pick up again. But I mean, I'm still enjoying it, but I can definitely see why a lot of people have kind of dropped off a bit, because it's not as grand as it was, and maybe to some oversaturated as well, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure. They went from like showing us 4 hours a year of content to like 60 hours a year. So I charted it out at some point. I mean, it's just from a business perspective, really quite dumb, and predictably they're now like, I think what we found is that the audience, we gave them a little too much. And it's like, yeah, no shit. Like, come on, you didn't know. Like I'm gonna greenlight 7 shows a year and see how that goes. But I think like for what the feedback I've heard from a lot of people over the years has been like, I would even stick around for their mediocre stuff or the stuff that I didn't necessarily know if I'd like or not, because I knew that there was a continuity to it and I wanted to kind of follow that. And either I've heard them say I no longer can keep up with it because there's too much of it, or I no longer want to keep up with it because none of it is connecting. It's been 4 years of nothing connecting. It's kind of obvious, like after you sit through like an entire show, like, okay, this is not part of a plan. There's no plan here. They clearly have, like, it would be great if they could do some X-Men. It seems like they're not interested in doing that. I don't know where the fuck the X-Men are. They threw us Xavier in one movie for no reason. It was like a big, like, just kicking the dick to the audience. But wheel out 90-year-old Patrick Stewart.
We've got Wolverine coming in Deadpool 3.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
I think that problem is doing
but that's another gimmick.
Yeah, that's true. I think that problem is doing it right as well, because X-Men, like the Fox movies, are pretty notoriously trash. Like they break their own continuity movie after movie kind of thing. So I think they...
Can I pitch something to you? I think that there's enough good in there of the X-Men Fox movies that if you did this, if you started with First Class, that's your first X-Men movie. I think that's pretty good. The Matthew Vaughn First Class movie. Jump from there to X2, which is kind of the best of like that first group.
Yeah.
Then go to Days of Future Past. I think you can go straight to Days of Future Past from there, which I love Days of Future Past actually.
Yeah.
And then go to Logan, and you're done. And you can skip all the other movies, and you got 4 pretty solid a really good X-Men experience. It kind of arcs nicely. Yeah.
I agree with that. I think I didn't mind Apocalypse either, but yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Dark Phoenix, because it was that was the main movie I said with the continuity, man. It was like they brought in the Phoenix at the end of that and teased it, and then the very next movie they changed the story. It's like But I think to the point is, I think they're a bit aware of it, that they kind of fell apart there, so they want to do it in the right way that's going to both please the audience and also please the fans that kind of want to see it done well.
Well, I think like audiences have kind of spoken that they don't like going to the movie theater unless it's Super Mario or Avatar.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. What do you think about the whole, like, what's going on with like box office results lately? Because we've been like pouring over them like in podcasts and things, like, just because, first of all, I'm gonna say it, I loved the new Indiana Jones movie. I
didn't see it.
I loved it, and so did Alanis next to me.
Yeah,
we were so pleasantly surprised after hearing all the negative reviews, after hearing everyone say it was woke. Because look, I'm the first person that will come out of a movie if it was woke and be like, "What the fuck was that bullshit?" You know what I mean? But I saw this and I came out going, "It was another Indiana Jones movie." I don't understand. Like, and everyone's complaining. Everyone's complaining Harrison Ford's too old in it, and it's about a grouchy old Indiana Jones. And it's like, but people change, and like, wouldn't it be cool to see like the evolution of a character that gets to 80 years old or whatever he is set in the movie, and see that he is a different person and that things aren't the same for him, rather than him just being the straight up Harrison Ford we've gotten from every other Indiana Jones movie. I like to see the progression, but that's just me. I don't know about everyone else,
I didn't see it. I nothing about the trailers grabbed me.
Yep.
But I do like James Mangold. I love James Mangold. Copland is an amazing movie, and that Johnny Cash movie is really, Walk the Line is super good, and Logan is amazing, and the Wolverine is quite good too, actually. And so I was like, well, if you hire James Mangold, you're probably not going to get a bad product. But I'll say this: I think a lot of people were okay with Harrison Ford as Han Solo in like The Force Awakens. He didn't do it. Like, I feel like Harrison Ford hasn't done anything for me in like 2 decades.
Yeah.
Every time he turns up, he's kind of like, he's this new uncharismatic version of himself, the kind of weed smoking, I hate it all thing. And I'm like not feeling it. I mean, especially when you compare it to, this guy was like the height of charisma in like a Temple of Doom or, but yeah, fair enough. That's where, the argument for evolving him is that's where the drama is. If you're 80, then where's the drama? It does on its face come off to me as like, is there any other story you guys can come up with besides like, hey, while off screen, this legacy character became a recluse and is depressed. Is there
Yeah.
anything else you can come up with? Is it because you're all depressed? You know, the people writing this stuff. Like I was thinking, like despite the Flash being a bit of a mess, it's probably the most respectful depiction of a legacy character we've seen in Michael Keaton's Batman. Like, because he doesn't play old depressed Batman, he just plays Batman. He just comes back as Batman.
Man, and that's the thing. You're talking to someone here who really liked the Flash. I actually really enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with it. Like, yes, I know it had some bad CG. Yes, I know there's some plot points that were silly. Yes, I know it has Ezra Miller. But at the end of the day, I came out of it pretty happy compared to when I came out of the Batman, which I don't hate that the Batman was fine, but it was too long. It was way too long, and it was very depressing. I
feel a PTSD from it. Like,
yeah, like we came out, and I was so down because I was like, I just feel like I just sat through 3 hours of just pure, like, I don't know if you felt the same.
Yeah, you probably have seen my review of the Batman.
Yeah.
We talked about it when it was fresh, but I remember one of my first thoughts about it was, well, when I was watching it, I remember like enough being like, oh, okay, they're really gonna do the noir thing, because we never really, like noir is a big part of certainly The Dark Knight Returns, and it's a big part of Batman Year One is it's a noir about Commissioner Gordon. And by the way, I think that's the movie. Make a Commissioner Gordon Batman Year One movie. But anyway, there's an animated version of it with Bryan Cranston as Commissioner Gordon. That
I've seen Year One. Year One's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. But I remember thinking like, oh, this would be kind of cool. And the movie never kind of realized itself. And the vision for it was a little too close to stuff we kind of had already seen. And
with Dark Knight trilogy and things like that.
Yeah, it wasn't like a departure enough from that. Catwoman did really very little for me. I was like pretty uncompelled when she was on screen. But what my takeaway was, hey, the crime families and Penguin, that's its own, and like the whole issue with with Thomas Wayne or Martha Wayne being crazy and all that stuff they kind of added, and Maroni keeping that under wraps, and he had like an unholy relationship with Thomas Wayne. I felt like that was its own thing. That's actually like its own narrative. And then separately, the Riddler chase, there's the Zodiac killer, there's a terrorist in the city, and Batman, through his detective work, needs to locate him. It's very distinct from this crime family thing. And I was thinking, I was like, really, what this movie is a little too big for its britches. Like it could have been chopped in half and made into like a really cool 2 or 3 part like HBO Max thing, but which during COVID may have actually worked. But yeah, I remember in the theater being like, this sure is going on too long. And then the third act really hurt it because they had to kind of they had to present a philosophy around their Batman. And it was like, instead of being vengeful, he's going to be like a paramedic. It felt like they slapped something on to be like, we think this is what our movie's about. It's almost like they didn't quite figure out what it was a smart movie and there was cool things in it. And there was new ideas to some degree. And I liked some of the quieter moments. Like I'm thinking of Riddler's first murder in the opening of the film.
Yes,
really
that was very creepy. That was very creepy, and I liked that. You know what I mean?
And there's this kind of there's like a political debate happening on television in the background. So there's kind of this the politics of Gotham are kind of playing in the background thematically. So there's like cool stuff happening in that movie, but somehow it's almost like they brought in like a world-renowned chef, and like somehow like the meal came out a little undercooked and not quite right. It's very rare. I feel that way about a movie where I'm like, I think the pieces are here, and somehow it didn't quite come together. Whereas Flash, now that's a movie. Okay, here's an interesting take on it. You probably saw me describe to EJ the movie.
I definitely did.
What I heard from people after that clip went up was they were like, either they said, I wasn't going to see that movie, and it was really interesting to hear Frankie talk about it. Actually, it sounds better than I thought. Or I heard, wow, I wasn't going to watch that movie. Hearing Frankie talk about it really confirms my suspicions, and I really don't want anything to do with it. So it's a high concept movie. It obviously is not for everybody. I think it holds together and is pretty good. For me, though, Ezra Miller is the disrupting factor in it.
That's the same for Alanis as well. Myself, look, I've worked out that I have to start separating the actors from the art because some of my favorite shows in the past, like that 70s show. We know what's happened with Danny Masterson recently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the shame that Danny Masterson is my favorite character in the show. You know what I mean? Which is like a whole nother can of worms where I'm like, fuck, now I have to try and break this barrier, you know? And I gave it a go and I started watching it again. And I was like, I don't look at him as Danny Masterson. I look at him as the character Hyde. You know what I mean? So what I did when I was going into The Flash was try to look at The Flash as The Flash, Barry Allen. I didn't want to look at it as Ezra Miller. And that seemed to work for me. It doesn't work for everybody, and I'm not saying it should work for everybody, but it definitely did work for me and helped my enjoyment levels.
Well, to be clear, his horrific sex crimes or whatever he's accused of was not actually my problem.
It was just his acting. He's just his acting.
I just found him to be a grating Gen Z piece of shit. And yeah. The moment that's I say it in my review. I'm like, there's a line where he's like, "Holy Funyuns!" Or there's another moment when they approach Supergirl's prison. There's this really great scene. Batman kicking ass all the way through, and there's two Barrys there, and one of them's like, "It looks like a giant scrotum." Like, why are they insisting on this guy being as annoying as possible in every scene? But that is I like that director. He did those It movies, and those had I thought cool vision to them. Interesting thing about those It movies, though, is it kind of felt like the second one, the Bill Hader one, kind of like overwrote the first one. Like you almost didn't need the first one; you got all the information you needed in the second one.
I think in the first
maybe if they knew the first one was going to be successful and that they were going to make two, maybe they would have restructured it.
I think that the first It was so fantastic. Like that was one of my movies of that year. I really enjoyed that movie. It was really good. But then the second one came out, and I was not so hot on it. So no, I didn't like It too. I got very bored during it. I thought that Pennywise didn't have anywhere near as the sort of like memorable moments that he did from the first one. You know, like the only thing I can remember from that movie with Pennywise was him under the bleachers, calling that little kid in. You know what I mean? Right at the first time you're kind of seeing him, and he's calling her in under the bleachers or whatever it was.
For you, like the most memorable, the kind of standout thing about the first movie would be like the Pennywise moments.
Definitely like the first bit with the boat. You know, with Georgie and the boat, and then later on when he's like when they when they run into the house and he's sort of like doing all these weird I loved his demeanor. You know what I mean? Like he's very sinister demeanor, and I think Bill Skarsgård did a great job on
he did.
being Pennywise. You know what I mean? But again, here on a lighter side, he loves the Tim Curry version.
Yeah, I think I like both installments of the most recent one. I think as much as each other, because I think I had that template. The It movie for me was was when I was a kid. It was the first movie that literally scared the shit out of me. Like I couldn't look at the moon for a good 2-3 years after seeing it because its face appears and say kill them all. And like I'd had my curtains closed, and if the curtains were even opened a little bit, I'd be like face against the wall, like no, can't do it. So it left a big impact on me. It hasn't aged well, but it was also good seeing kind of the different interpretations, and I think it was done well. It was modernized and kind of brought up to where it should be. I think a bit better with the book. So that
guy's going to go on to make Batman Brave and the Bold, and under James Gunn's tutelage, I think maybe they'll have something.
Yeah.
That could be good. That could be good. So, like, back to my original question, which I just remembered I asked you, was what do you think's going on with all these box office results lately? Do you think it's to do with the actual films themselves, or do you think there's something going on with the climate of, like, audiences going in?
Well, I think to start, I think there's a lot to be said for momentum, like when people are in a routine. And I think prior to COVID, we were in a routine of going to the movie theater. And even then, even for the past 15 years, there's been a lot of question about there have been declining box office sales for anything that's not a tentpole. So the industry already adjusted some time ago to be like, okay, people are going to still come out to movies, but only if it's a Marvel film, only if we spend $200 million on it, only if we spend $300 million on it, only if it's a premium IMAX experience. They're not going to come out to see a $30 million Adam Sandler movie anymore. Like that, if Adam Sandler is going to now be made for Netflix, for instance. By the way, I think that's a real shame that comedy, comedy is a perfect genre to congregate a bunch of people in the same room and laugh together.
100%.
I mean, you can almost have a not so funny movie and everybody's still cracking up laughing. Like that's that's a very social experience, I think. But
I think you said that about Kevin Smith's Jay and Silent Bob's reboot. Didn't you? That it wasn't that great of a funny of a movie, but in a cinema with everyone else, it was sort of more funny because everyone was like helping each other laugh along. Yeah.
And I only realized that later when I rewatched the movie, and I was like, "This is not very funny." I remember I walked away going like, "We all cracked up." And same with I saw Red State in 2010. He four-walled that. Famously, he four-walled that. Where he rented his own theaters and screened it for, it was like $60, see the movie and see a Q&A. And which for Kevin Smith at the time is a genius business model, because if the guy spends $5 million on a movie, he can make $5 million on the road.
Yeah.
Pretty easily. But I remember that. Now I love that movie. I think that probably is his best film. But
Red State is great. Red State is great.
Yeah, it's great. But the crowd for the horror moments and they were right along for every horror moment too. And so horror is another genre that's like great for big packed cinemas in the city, so that's a shame that we miss all that. So, but I think that a lot of so COVID is obviously a major issue, which is that people already were asking themselves, what's the value proposition of going to the theater? Then they stopped going to the theater. They started relying on it even more than they already were. YouTube was already dominating a lot of their time. I know, speaking for myself, and I bet you guys are the same way, and I bet everybody else on the planet is the same way. But when I have my free time and I can take a breath and it's time to decide what am I going to put on TV, it's so often easier and lower stakes to pop on a YouTube video than it is to pop on a commercial or narrative film. Even if I know the narrative film is going to be more intellectually nourishing, often the YouTube video wins. So I think once we broke the routine of going to the theater, it was like, all right, well, I don't, and then the studios didn't help themselves, because then they started saying, don't worry about it. We're going to have it on that streaming platform that you now subscribe to, that you didn't subscribe to before. Like it used to be like, you had to get it on VOD, or you gotta get it on Blu-ray, or you gotta, you had to go out of your way in some way for home video releases. And now it's just like, no, it's going to come to the platform I already subscribe to. So why would I double dip on this thing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I believe that's what's hurting Disney a lot too. I think their profit margins I think they're losing like over $1 billion like from Disney Plus every like 3 quarters or something like that, I heard, or every 3 months.
Yeah, everybody's got an opinion about this. And like I was having a debate about it just tonight. Or somebody was saying, no, a lot of times you'll hear like, and it does complicate the stats. Like it makes it difficult to understand. Like they've got this big sports business at Disney, and they've got cricket in India, and that affects the bottom line. And so it's like, it's hard to make sense of it. But what I will say, what I think is not up for debate, what I think is not controversial, is Disney's product has sucked they've really suffered, I think, in most people's minds. They've made a serious shift for the worse since 2019. Call it post-Endgame if you must. They've had some wins, but not many. Almost none. I mean, like Mandalorian season 2, and then besides that, like I'm talking about Lucasfilm and Marvel, because Lucasfilm and Marvel represent Marvel itself, I think, represents 40% of the entire box office. So then you might say, okay, well, maybe the studios are going to stop relying on box office. Well, obviously that's not, I mean, maybe now that's the case. Now you hear Bob Iger saying like, we're going to spend less on less content. We're going to, no more $200 million budget, no more $300 million budgets. But that's what they've been doing for the last 4 years. They spend $300 million, $200 million on Pixar movies that are, nobody's excited about. Well, I point to Lightyear a lot, where I'm like, in concept, Lightyear was a way to get another Toy Story sequel that wasn't as hacky as just doing another Toy Story sequel. And so on paper, it sounds like sort of a good idea. It's like, oh, that might have legs. But I don't know if you saw it, the execution of it is so like postmodern, and it's so out of step with what audiences would ever be looking for. And it just makes me wonder, like, how is the business side at that company so disconnected from the creative side? Because I really think the creative side of that company is made up of a lot of people that pathologically want to tell the same stories and are kind of stuck in the same cultural vortex. And I think audiences know it. And it's hurting the brand like hell. And you get, I mean, the box office stats alone can show you that. Like they were routinely making $1 billion at the box office, like Lion King, Alice in Wonderland, like kind of Marvel made fucking $1 billion like in 2019. Obviously, every Avengers movie, like they were just knocking Toy Story 3, Toy Story 4, Finding Dory, just knocking them out of the park. $1 billion, $1 billion, $1 billion, and now like they can't hop over like 400 million with Little Mermaid. Or so I think that's the audience saying, first of all, I don't really want to go out. But more importantly, second of all, I don't like your product. Because if they really didn't want to go out, they wouldn't go see the Mario movie.
That's what I was thinking too, which is that the Mario movie proved to everyone that you can still do completely like huge numbers at like box office, but it has to be something that is it's an event. You know what I mean? It has to be an event. It can't just be here's another Black Panther. Here's another thing, you know, like, not that I'm saying I don't know if Wakanda Forever, I don't know how well Wakanda Forever did in box office results. All I know is that
it eked out a profit.
Yeah, even though I went down and saw it, because we have to for our YouTube channel, we do a movie. I'm not a Marvel fan, and I was sitting there thinking for the first 45 minutes, I'm like, this is just a legit funeral. Like, I was like, when are we getting into the action? Because this is a funeral right now, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
that kind of was confusing. But on to another thing I wanted to quickly ask you about was, so why did you start doing Red Cow Arcade? Because I was doing some research before we did this interview with you and everything like that. Because I know you work quite well from Red Cow Arcade and doing all those things, but I wasn't quite sure how many movies and stuff you've done until I checked your IMDb and did all these things, and I was like, Jesus, he's done a lot. Like, he has done a lot of shit. So, like, I wanted to talk to you about that. Not saying it's shit, but, you know, a lot of shit. You know what I mean?
He's done a lot of shit.
So I just wanted to, how did you move from, like, doing movies and stuff to doing Red Cow Arcade, and what do you enjoy more?
Yeah, there's a funny pattern in my creative career where I work really hard on certain kinds of projects, and then the ones that I was doing for a lark become the thing that I become known for. So what I would encourage like your viewers to check out if they want to learn about me is the channel trailer for either of my 2 YouTube channels, either Red Cow Arcade or Red Cow Entertainment. It's a 16-minute little documentary I made earlier this year that I think comprehensively and very carefully plots you through where I started, what I've done, each feature, why I made each feature, who my major collaborators have been, and how that's transitioned into podcasting and into YouTube content, and what kinds of YouTube content we've created. But here's the so there's beautiful visual aids that go with that and everything else. But here's kind of like the cliff notes of it. I got into filmmaking when I was 14. It was really, I was always interested in like stop motion animation, or anytime back then, we didn't have DVDs, but if a making of thing about Jurassic Park came on TV, I'd rush in to check it out. Special, any kind of DIY, any kind of make your own, any kind of do it yourself, I thought was really interesting. But what was, what kind of was the light bulb moment was I was at a sleepover in 8th grade, and I was a big South Park fan, and they had only just come out the previous year, 97. And I started learning about these guys, Trey and Matt, who from Colorado. They had met in college. Okay, 2 guys met in school. That's kind of interesting. They were very authentic, like their personalities they really seemed like 2 normal guys that somehow like broke through. I remember reading like interviews with them in TV Guide and that sort of thing. And I learned that in college, they made a feature film called Cannibal the Musical. And so I was at the sleepover, and we went to Hollywood Video of all places, ironically, Hollywood Video. And they were like, we should pick up a movie. And I saw Cannibal, and I said, oh my God, that movie that I heard about, that independent film that those guys made is here. Can we watch it, everybody? And everybody's like, no, we want to pick up like an Adam Sandler thing or something. I somehow convinced everybody to go home with that tape. And you could argue that that's kind of what changed my life, was the decision to go home with that tape or not. So we went up to, there was like an attic in this dude's house. I remember it was like a kid none of us were all that close with. Like he wanted to throw a big party, so we all went. And it was like a sleepover party. So it was like movie time. We go in the, none of us should be watching this thing. All of the pre-roll before the movie starts is Trauma. And I had not heard of Trauma before. it's Terror Firmer. It's Romeo and Juliet. There's a trailer. In Romeo and Juliet, there's a moment where she's having like a dream and like she becomes pregnant. And when her pregnant stomach bursts, it's popcorn. And the dude's like eating popcorn out of her stomach. And I was like, never seen anything like this. And all of my friends, all these other 13, 14-year-old friends are laughing hysterically because they can't believe it either. They're totally scandalized by it too. But unlike them, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If this counts as then where do I fit into this? And then we proceeded to watch Cannibal. And in the opening sequence, it's Trey running around with a fake beard at age 20-some, eating his friends with fake blood flying all over the place. We had a TV that wasn't tuned properly. And so the blood looked orange, like bright orange. And again, everybody's laughing. They're like, oh my God, the blood looks so fake. And I was just getting such a thrill out of like, what the fuck is this? And then and everybody then fell asleep because they only were interested in it for a moment, but I was hooked. And what I saw, again, for the first time in my movie watching life, was like I could see the production. I'd never seen the production before. It always, the illusions, the special effects worked on me in the past. This time I was seeing friends laughing together, making a movie, rolling a camera. And that was just like, well, why can't I do that then? And so I started writing a script for my first feature. And, it was like this like musical comedy about like an obese kid called I Need to Lose 10 Pounds. And I got it in my head that like, I'm going to make this movie or I'm going to die. That's what I'm going to do. Like, there's no way. It was almost like an arbitrary choice to go with that particular plot, but it was the script I had and it was the script I was going to do. Then the next thing happens that matters the most, which is I meet this guy named John Hunt. And John, for those who don't know, he's like this real big dude that is my co-host on a web series we do called Box Mac. He's one of the funniest, most charismatic, awesome people I know in my life. And anybody who watches that content falls in love with John, like no exceptions. Everybody, like John is a very lovable dude. A lot of people say on first occasion that he looks like John Candy. So John in the year 2000 is one of the first people I ever meet who knows how to like ingest video into a computer. And like nobody else in the area knew how to do that. He also has a MIDI keyboard. He can orchestrate his own music. And he's a musician. He's a pianist. And all of a sudden, and by the way, we're making a movie about fat people, and he's a big fat guy, and he's like, I'll be in the movie. And all of a sudden, like I felt like through his friend. Oh, and he was older too. I was like 14. He was like 20. I met him through his sister on our track team, and so he's like a guy who could drive. He had some disposable income. He lived with his dad. He was a technologist. It kind of, to a 14-year-old, it felt like I now have somebody I can make movies now because of this guy. And he bought all of our equipment in those days. We bought that 24p camera that was very famous, the Panasonic, whatever it was, DVX 100. It was standard def, but it was 24p digital, which like at the time, that was like, oh, like cinema. And we went on for 3 years. We shot this movie. It's been dubbed there's one review of it that says like the Lord of the Rings of high school productions, because we shot, like the script had 1 million locations and costumes. This thing, we just went all out with this thing. I was too stupid to realize you can't make a feature film when you're in high school, but I grinded and I grinded. So that led to film school. I went to Emerson College in Boston. And I met more people, more collaborators, more talent, made a movie called, and 10 Pounds went on to, poetically, it won the Troba Dance Film Festival. So, Troma was my big thing at that time. I got to meet Lloyd. They distributed the film, which was really cool. I never did get to see a DVD release of it, which was like what I always wanted. But it's on Troma now to this day. It's on their streaming platform now. So they own it for another 3 years? They signed it for 20 years. So I think I get it back in 3 years. Not that I've not sold it on my website. They don't seem to care about that. So that leads to, I make Abo the Hugh Monkey next, a film about a half man, half ape, high concept comedy. I played him. This is the first time I got to play with prosthetics. I went down to Tom Savini's School of Makeup in Pittsburgh.
Right.
A guy who was going to school there, and he was working with this other makeup effects artist named Jerry Langley, I think his name was. He was this dude who worked on Babylon 5 and all these other shows. And they did a head cast of me, and they molded and sculpted a cool mask that we had designed. And that's a really fun movie. There's a feature length making of that you can see on YouTube for all of this. I went to Los Angeles after that, thinking that I wanted to go into media professionally. I hated LA. The traffic alone is reason to leave that city. I mean, really, it was just terrible. And, I don't know, I'm from Massachusetts. Melbourne is a little similar. Like we're ball busters. We're sarcastic. we're a pain in the ass. LA is not that way. So I said I'm really hungry for Boston. I'm hungry for the cold. I think the cold makes you smarter or something. And so I went back and we made a really cool movie called Sexually Frank that was kind of more like an indie drama. It was 2010, so mumblecore was really popular at the time, and it's kind of a little more along those lines. And that's what brought me out to Sydney, was that movie. And amazing experience, by the way, to go to like an art university on the other end of the globe. And what was so cool is they brought all of, tons of film students saw our work, and we got to do a Q&A out there. It was like people were actually interested in what we were doing. It was really cool. And then that led to I got my master's soon after that. I thought I was going to teach film, and I met a guy who had written a short film that I really liked called "It Looked Like You Guys Were Having Fun Up There." And so we made a feature version of it just called "Having Fun Up There." It's about a musician in his late 30s who's like, from the start of the movie to the end, it's really about him deciding he's going to give up on his dream. And that's my favorite of the four. I'm really proud of that movie. It's like some of the other ones I'm happy to show people, but like I don't know if I want to sit through them because I'm like real close to them. That one I shot in 9 days, so we just like fired through it. It was really cool to like work with a writer instead of myself doing the writing. I love the primary performances in it. It's short, like we cut it at like 65 minutes, because fuck it. It doesn't need to be much longer. So I'm just really proud of that one. That went to the Austin Film Festival. That was the biggest film festival I've been part of, out in Austin, Texas. That led to me being a screener actually for their film festival. That was a really cool experience. They were like, here, watch 120 movies and rank them and rate them. We do a YouTube series now called No Views, where we find videos on YouTube that nobody has watched. And we review them as though they're submissions to our film festival. So then shortly after, we were podcasting just for fun, almost as a way to kind of keep any audience we had accumulated at that point interested in us between projects. And then John, who I mentioned, John Hunn, he goes, hey, what about I had this funny idea. It's called Box Mac. How about we'll take every macaroni and cheese from the supermarket, we'll review them all, and I'll dress up in a chef's costume, and we'll shoot it on iPhones or something. And I was like, all right, if you want. I wasn't super into the idea. Well, EJ comes over. I met EJ through the master's program, and he sets up a nice camera, an overhead. He's got his main camera. We're using the lapels from all of our features. All of a sudden, we're treating this like cooking show, like it's like a real. I edited it, meticulously, and it ended up popping up on the front page of /r/videos for a few days, and we got this big influx of people that were interested in our mac and cheese show, and it's just me and John making each other. It's essentially like a podcast, but we're boiling water during it. And that turned into doing Halloween specials that were full-blown horror movies. And that turned into doing Christmas specials, which were full-blown variety shows. And I mean, once some people were watching, we went all the fuck out. Box Mac became my life. And we did a lot of kind of adjacent content to that. We did a show called What's in John's Cart, where we just follow John around. He's like a bargain hunter. And we just watch him kind of think his way through purchases. And that brought us out to flea markets and all kinds of great stuff. And so it's to the audience, it's like they're coming along to shop with us. So we made 100 of those things. We made almost 200 now, box Macs. People from around the globe, including Australia, they've been sending us macaroni and cheeses. We thought we'd be done in 10 episodes. It turns out there's endless numbers of mac and cheeses.
I never knew there was so much.
We've tried all of yours, and you guys have like canned cheese for some reason, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's in the deluxe macaroni cheese. From
yes. You know your terminology.
Yep. Definitely.
And then we did a documentary somewhere in there about how expensive weddings have become, and that was a really fun project. It's like a feature-length documentary. My wife and I co-directed together. I think it's a really good time, and it's kind of like a deluxe version of our web content, I guess would be a good way to describe it. So I don't know, 5-6 years pass of just like cranking out. I mean, we didn't miss we would release on Sundays, and we would often release on Tuesdays as well. So for a long time, we didn't miss a Sunday, didn't miss a Tuesday, hundreds and hundreds of videos, all of them heavily edited, all of them pouring our heart into them. I have a thing about like, I love lowbrow stuff that I put too much effort into. And then it was EJ who said, listen, we've got a Patreon. We've got like 100 people that subscribe to it. We make about $400 a month, something like that at the time. I think we owe them more than we're giving them. Why don't we have like a $2 tier? And you and I, this is his pitch. He's like, you and I will get on the phone, and for 10 minutes, we'll talk about what we're working on, what's going on in our lives, and you know, what are we watching right now? What are we playing? And we'll get out. Right. That was his pitch. Well, so it was audio only at first, and it was over the phone. So it was a shitty phone recording. Like if you listen to the first episode or two, and then I'm like, we take out the Zoom recorders. Let's make this sound nicer, right? And then I'm talking, I can't talk about The Flash for less than 45 minutes. So I'm a talker, and it turned into a 2-hour podcast. Okay, fine. So it's a 2-hour podcast. It's audio only. It's only for patrons. Not that hard for us to get on, because it couldn't compete with all of the effort that I was already putting into everything. Well, then some of the patrons were like, I think we had done video once or twice with Zoom, and they're like, oh, we really like it when you do video. Can you do video every time? We're like, yeah, that would probably add like 20 minutes to the whole process. Okay, let's do it. We do video. Then like some of them were enjoying it, and they were like, why don't you maybe put up some clips so that more people will subscribe? I'm like, okay. Well, there was one such clip.
Where I know the exact clip you're talking about right now. The one that I was introduced to you through.
Where there we are in our PJs, and we're just blabbing and blabbing about James Rolfe. Just honestly, we thought we were talking to 40 people, our patrons, and I threw it up there just as like a whatever. And of course, the Cinemaster of Truth subreddit, which we had been browsing and laughing about for a little while, they picked it up. Okay, fine, and it got like, I think it went up to like 4,000 views. We're like, oh wow. And then something happened where it exploded, and it started to get like recommended with James Rolfe's behind the scenes video, as if it's like a special feature on the DVD, which we didn't expect. And a lot of hate. Something that happened, if you guys have ever experienced this, or if you someday might experience this, is you'll be going along, you'll be just talking to the same audience for a while, and then when something breaks through, and a whole new stranger audience that didn't know you existed, when they see you for the first time, half of them fucking hate you, think you're ugly, think you're stupid, think you're dumb. But then like 10% stick around. And so like all the haters go away, and then and so you have to like weather a storm of hate. And then like you 5 to 10% stick around, and then you have like they come along with you for the next several videos, which is cool. It's like an attrition period. And then, so then we rebranded. At the time, we were calling it the Patreon podcast. Well, we rebranded it to Red Cow Arcade. And I think I was maybe selling myself short. Like, I didn't think of, like, me and my in-depth opinions about movies I just saw, as an example, or my in-depth opinions about a YouTuber. I didn't think of that as something that we could sell the channel on. But I think I have found over time that people want my views on things because I'll express them with some degree of depth. And I think we were saying to Josh from Dancing with Ghosts the other day, like, I think a lot of people feel the same ways that we do. I get emails a lot from people that are our age, also with children, or they also lost a lot of weight, or there's something that we have like deeply in common, almost like spiritually in common. And they're like, it's just really nice to listen to somebody on YouTube that kind of like is simpatico with me. And that's what we're doing on YouTube is we're kind of looking for that person who's simpatico with us, you know?
Definitely. And like, that's exactly how I got introduced to you, was the James Rolfe, like the first one you did where, yeah, and I definitely feel the same way about it, which is that his quality has dipped. He has some fantastic episodes that he's done. And then you kind of notice that there was like multiple episodes in a row where you started going, this isn't as good as it once was. You know what I mean?
I remember I had a friend who was like, did you notice that was edited differently? And I was like, no, you know, I have directed, I've written, I've acted, but if I needed something to go on my tombstone, it would be editor. I'm an editor.
Yeah.
You know, I really love video editing. It's the art that I've put the many tens of thousands of hours into at this point. I like to think I'm really attuned to editing. And I was like, oh, I got to go. In fact, just a quick side story on that. I remember, so I edit all the Box Mac episodes, for instance. And I think that's very important because when it's two unscripted people speaking, you have to find the comedic rhythm in it. And if that rhythm's not there, the audience, I think, will lose like their rhythm with you. It's what brings them along moment to moment, second to second, you know? And so there was an episode where we were joking on camera about I'm going to let John edit this one. And then we went through with the joke and John edited it and it drove me fucking crazy. And so then I put up the Frankie cut. So the primary episode is a John cut and then there's a Frankie cut. And I think mine's shorter, of course, because I'm a tight editor generally. But we get a lot of people's opinions on that. We're like, oh yeah, it does have like a different DNA to it. You know, it's his sensibilities versus your sensibilities. So somebody was pointing out, I think it was the Pepsi Man episode of AVGN. They were like, do you notice that it's got different sensibilities than his normal sort of thing? And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And then they pointed out in the inflatable decorations episode.
The you could see Kieran, couldn't you? Was it Kieran or
Justin, even more common.
Yeah.
You know, this giant guy being like, I'm James now. Absurd. But what the thing that I find so interesting about all of it is, yes, the decline, yes, the finer details, but more so, it's more like, I think conventional wisdom is if you can hand something off, you know, if you can hand your legacy off to someone else and it can survive beyond you, then you've done your job. Like that's the real challenge. And I'm kind of like pushing back against that a little bit. I'm like, no, I think sometimes like the thing is you. Yep. You know, South Park is Trey and Matt. Yep. Trey and Matt hand it to somebody else. Marvel is Kevin Feige. You know, and when Kevin Feige kind of disengaged, it's like the DNA of the thing changed. Or maybe the DNA was Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Hemsworth and, you know, whatever. But the point is like, I think everything has its heyday. You sort of have to accept that, like, if you hand this thing off, it just ain't going to be what it was.
No, definitely. And especially something like Angry Video Game Nerd, which was James Rolfe. You know, that was him. Yeah. Like, that was all him writing. That was, I believe, him editing all that time. And then suddenly it felt like someone else was writing it completely. Like, it was like he was like, all right, I'm going to show up and do the VO.
Yeah. Whatever, you know what I mean? That's literally true. Yeah.
My favorite thing that you've ever said is that he came in and did his hey, I'm talking crusty.
Yeah. That thing. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for other creative people like us, it's kind of like depressing to find somebody that you found so inspired abandon his love of the thing. And then it's a little bit worse than that, actually, because it'd be one thing if he was like, hey folks, it's me, James. I'd like you to know I'm hanging it up. You know, that would be one thing. But it's kind of more like, I'm going to pretend I haven't hung it up.
Yeah, and I loved when I emailed you first, and you got back to me, and you're like, I'm just a lot like James at Rolfe. I'm pretty busy with my time. And I knew straight away, I was like, oh, we're going to have a fun time. So, but yeah, no, like, actually, you were mentioning that, you know, you have a friend that had like a MIDI keyboard and he's a musician and stuff. Like, that's actually what, if I was going to go anywhere on my tombstone, it would say drummer, you know, because I've been playing drums since I was 9. I'm actually been in multiple bands. I've toured with bands like the Amity Affliction, Parkway Drive, all these huge bands, you know, because they're all from Australia. And I've got a band launching actually Tuesday next week. Our music video and our song goes live onto all platforms next week, next Tuesday. So, yeah, like that's something that I'm really fascinated in. And I like making scores for movies and videos and stuff like that too, because I'm pretty good with piano. I'm pretty good with like doing string arrangement and things like that. So, yeah, I'd consider myself a musician first, but I'd also put myself as like an entertainer. I like being an entertainer. You know, that's what I love to do, as well as do film, because I just made our whole music video and edited it and did all that kind of stuff too.
And music and storytelling too, right? You know, it's a narrative, a song,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. And the song we wrote, you know, it's all about losing somebody and them going to a better place. We're not sure what that place is. None of us have firm beliefs in where those places are or what's going on. But we tried to make it, you know, that this person goes otherworldly. So, you know, it looks like it's like we went to a big tulip field, you know what I mean? And it was filled with like different colored tulips, and we got them to walk through it, and we changed it so we got sky replacement shots with like sort of spacey galactic stuff going on in the background and all that, and it's coming out looking really cool. So yeah, like I feel like there's a few things that, you know, we definitely have in common with like how we feel about movies, how we feel about making them, how we feel about tone, and also how we feel about other content creators such as James Rolfe, you know what I mean? So but yeah, like, I mean, all I can say about Red Cow Arcade is you guys are killing it. Like, I've watched your view count go from when I discovered you, it was like every video you were getting around for the 500 view mark to the James Rolfe video, which went to what, 75K? And
that one's like 205. Yeah.
That's right, 205. But you do have another one that's 75K-ish around.
Yeah, there's, you know, all of them really hit every time I do James. And then we have to fend off against accusations of milking it. And it's kind of funny because like we could easily go hard on being a drama channel, but there's really no incentive for us to do that. A, because I think we have more to offer than on this particular topic, and B, this is not our day job for either of us. So I'm not like, oh my God, we struck gold and we have to commit to it or something like that. So then the question has become like, well, then why have you done 15 videos on James Rolfe? It's like, well, because our audience is interested in our takes, and a few things have happened. Kieran quit, and they plagiarized an entire Monster Madness. And I mean, people want to know how we feel about these things. And so
yeah, exactly.
Discussion. And some people have been like, this is bullying or this is harassment to discuss it. And I'm like, as Quentin Tarantino once said, I just reject your hypothesis. I don't think I get 3,000 views per video discussing a massive channel like a pioneer in the YouTube space. I don't see how that's harassment. And you know, I suppose there's a below the belt comments that we could make or we have made or what, you know, I try to avoid discussing like their weight and stuff like that. We made a fat joke or two, and we paid your.
Those made me die of laughter. There was one that you said on your first one that I just was like rolling, and you're like, pardon the pun. Like
something about rolls. I think.
Yeah. We're already running a little bit over time. You don't mind if we're just like a couple of more minutes or whatever asking you?
Yeah, it's all good.
All right, Alanis, I'm sure you have some things you want to ask. Is there anything you want to talk about?
I was kind of fascinated with the whole Troma thing because a bit of a fan of the Troma franchise. So it's interesting, that story, and that would have been pretty cool to meet Lloyd Kaufman. That would have been an experience.
Yeah, he's in ABO too. We got him in there. And then something I didn't mention was the guy who wrote Having Fun Up There. His name is Jeff. He directed a documentary about Lloyd called Movies of the Future, and Lloyd, you know, gave him a lot of access to make that movie, and that included going to the set of Return to Nukem High in 2012, and he asked me to be a cinematographer for that. So I actually got to hang out for 2 days on the set of Nukem High and hang out with Lloyd and you know, watch all the chaos. And then years later, they came out with a making of feature documentary on that movie. And I was like, oh my God, I was there for some of this. And I know all those people. And I didn't know there was that drama happening at that time. You know, I was just kind of like a happy-go-lucky guy with a camera. But I'll say, like, if you were to ask me, like, outside of Cannibal, of course, which is like, you know, I cherish that film. like what's my favorite trauma movie, I would cheat with my answer, and I would say like probably something like The Making of Terra Firma or The Making of Citizen Toxie. Those making of documentaries on their DVDs are magic. And if there is a Red Cow Arcade clip of me talking about those where I go a little hard on Lloyd, because I watching them from a 2023 perspective. I mean, there's definitely abuse going on there, and they're kind of they view it almost like it's virtuous, almost like, oh, this is just like suffering for art. But I feel like in today's climate, it kind of is just viewed as manipulation and abuse. And I think those days are over. You know, of like making like people sleeping in basements, you know, like co-ed bathrooms that are unhygienic, and you know, all these things that kind of make like a hearty trauma experience. I think that's all done with.
Yeah, definitely.
The Me Too potential of a trauma set alone, you know, should shut that shit down.
So what's coming up for you in the future with you and EJ and things like that? What have you got coming up?
Well, so I've been managing 2 channels is the kind of result of it. And so every 2 weeks we record the full podcast, which people can, for $2 a month, they can watch the full podcast uninterrupted. And then if they don't want to do that, they can wait for the clips from it to come out, which I edit first. So that's where you actually see like kind of the you know, for instance, I did a clip recently of talking about Kevin Smith's mental break that he had and some of the weed stuff. And
I watched that. Yeah.
That's been kind of interesting too. Is like I'm starting to express some of my like more controversial opinions. Like I think maybe like weed has gotten too good of a rap, as an example, and that people bite back when you say that shit. Don't come for their weed.
I'm not going to argue with that at all with you. I'm a weed smoker, obviously, but but I do not let it affect me in a way that I think it can affect other people. Or well, it's not that I don't let it; it just doesn't seem to affect me that way. And I kind of like look at it like, some people can handle their alcohol, some people can't. Some people can handle their drugs, some people can't. And if you can't handle it, or if it is affecting you in a way you shouldn't, then you should probably stay away from it. You know what I mean? But I also think that you shouldn't do it in times when you're expected to be on as well. You know what I mean? Like, or when you're creating something like a movie, you shouldn't go to film school blazed. You shouldn't go to the film set blazed. You know what I mean? And I think that's where a lot of people have that sort of like problem balance, you know, with their balance. You know what I mean? And I think that sounds like what Kevin Smith had, was a problem with balance. You know,
I don't begrudge people their vices or their outlets. We all have them. Yep. You know, it's akin to video games. It's akin to, you know, name your thing. I do think alcohol is far more harmful than anybody cares to admit.
Yep.
Because there's kind of like a mass delusion thing that can happen where everybody's doing it so habitually that nobody's going to call anybody out on it.
Yep.
And so everybody is like, oh yeah, I know about those alcoholics, but I'm not one. And nobody wants to investigate that, because that would be being a narc, or that would be being judgmental, or it would be calling yourself out, because you know, like, oh shit, I do have 3 drinks a night, but I think I'm okay with 3 drinks a night, you know. And then like you quickly so it's like a society of rationalizing. Yep. And I think that like I'll tell you, when I put up that clip, there were tons of comments from people who were like, you know what, man, like I'm thinking maybe I'm smoking too much weed. I think, you know, I go to it too often. I leap to it, you know, and I like to think that I don't need it to manage my anxiety, but apparently I do, because you know, I normally smoke in these circumstances when I have to meet my family or whatever, and I can't imagine doing it without it, and so clearly I have a problem. So I don't know. I worry that we underplay this stuff to cover our own asses, and so I don't know. I think it's fun. It's been fun for me to try to build a little bit of courage to say something unpopular.
That's why I respect you, man. Is because you say what you want to say. You say how you feel. You don't sugarcoat it for people, and I think that's really important when you're trying to build up a relationship with the audience you're with, is to not bullshit them on what your feelings are. You know what I mean? People want to hear your thoughts. They don't want to hear what you think they want to hear. You know what I mean? So
yeah, well said. I was thinking about this just the other day. I was like, you know, because like the childish or immature approach to something like a YouTube would be, I want to be seen by as many people as possible, and I want them all to think I'm cool. Like that's kind of like I think how a child approaches it. And assuming that you're not going to be able to make it your full-time job, why would you continue to have a creative outlet or to express yourself on a platform like this? And for me, it's like the answer is pretty obvious. It's a connect with people who I want to connect with, and exactly. I'm not going to be successful at that if I'm not as much myself as possible. It's also, by the way, it ain't bad for business, because I think what people are seeking out on YouTube is authenticity as much as possible. Because there's you can run into a whole lot of bullshit on YouTube and a whole lot of like people chasing the algorithm or riding trends or oh shit, the Sonic movie's coming out, so we better do a Sonic AVGN or whatever. Like there's a lot of that you're watching. So watching some dude from Massachusetts be like, I don't like weed. I think even if you love weed, I think it's a little bit like it's like a little bit of a glitch in the matrix, hopefully. And
it's different here in Australia too, because we still haven't got the freedoms of it that you guys have over in a lot of states in America. Where it is. You can go to a dispensary. You can go do this. Yes, it's slowly coming in that way, but it is all medicinal, and you have to have a thing from your doctor and all that. If otherwise, you're not supposed to have it. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we don't know how long that's going to be till that changes, or if it does change. But I think our government's a lot more weary about like, hey, once we open this Pandora's box, we cannot shut this box. So we better be careful.
Funnily, with that, there's one place where you can get it, and that's Canberra, which also is where all the politicians are, which is I wonder if there's a correlation there.
I had that you might know. I had this gigantic weight loss a couple of years ago.
I do know. I followed it a fair bit. Yeah.
Yeah, my addiction was food, and it was a major area of suffering, I think, in my life, where and one that I think a lot of people relate to, which was this kind of this comfort eating and lack of exercise and being too busy. And a lot of it was like I had a long commute and I was too busy, and it's you just keep taking these gambles with your health every time you make a bad food decision. And I heard Steve-O, of all people, Steve-O has a lot of wisdom these days about.
He definitely does.
And he said like beating addiction. One of the things that's cool about beating that particular disease is you can become. Like most of the time, like if you have cancer and you beat cancer, you're kind of just like back to your baseline health. And he's like, but beating addiction, like you actually transform into maybe a person that's better than the person from before the addiction. Yeah. So there was a time when I actually carried the period of time where I was really big. I carried it kind of shamefully. Like there's a lot of video of me like that, and there's a lot of people that discover me and are like, oh wow, you were really fat, And I for a little while I was kind of like embarrassed by it. I was like, is there any way I can digitally defat myself, or something? So that the backlog, but you realize you're like, in some ways, going through an adversity like that and then coming out better on the other end, it really does. It's the kind of the Christian notion of like the suffering is sanctifying. It's a little bit sick, but I think there's something to it.
Well, I do want to congratulate you on that, because that is you put in a lot of effort and you lost a huge amount of weight. When you look at, where you were back then and where you are now, it is a huge difference. You know what I mean? And like when I saw that, because I did discover you while you were skinny. Yeah. And then I heard about your weight loss and went back and looked at the videos, and I was like, man, that's a complete difference. You know what I mean? So congratulations on that, man. I'm very happy that you stuck to that. I'm very happy that you stuck to like being that, you wanted it that bad that you stuck to it. You know what I mean? Because there are people out there that want it, but it seems like that they can't want it enough because they're not putting in that effort. You know what I mean?
So true. Yeah. I often think of it in terms of like, that's just it. Is Arnold Schwarzenegger of all people? He was like, and there's a whole. I put together a weight loss video. This kind of like half hour that does a deep dive into the whole thing. And I tell you, of all the yes, I hear about James Rolfe stuff a lot. Second to that, I hear about weight loss stuff a lot. A lot of people come to me and they're like, I saw your weight loss video. It was a kick in the ass for me, and I really like a lot of what you said. But anyway, Arnold said something like, he's like, as long as I have a goal, I'm happy to be in the gym because everything I'm doing is toward the goal. And he's saying like because I've already made my mind up that this is what I want, then all effort pointed in that direction is actually satisfying and actually fun and really it doesn't require the level of kind of like mental effort to get it done. So what that means is that all of the psychological effort is front loaded into that kind of that moment that you make your decision. And I've heard from other people, I've talked to a lot of other people who have lost a lot of weight, and they say the same thing. They're always like, I had enough. And when I had enough, everything changed. Drug addicts talk like this too, actually.
I can speak about that, actually. I can speak from that. I was a massive meth addict
Shit. Yeah.
for 6 years straight. And then maybe longer every day. I used every day, and it destroyed me mentally. It took my son away from me. It took my whole life away from me, and I had to become a better person. And now I finally have my son. I finally have, a lot more positive outlook, and yeah, I have not once like gone back to it. You know what I mean?
Was there some moment where you were like, I've had enough?
Yep. I looked at myself in the mirror one day and just thought to myself, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm wasting my money. I'm wasting my life. I'm not progressing. My house is trashed. You know what I mean? Like, it just makes you only care about that one thing, which is meth. You know what I mean? You care about nothing else.
Yeah.
Everyone else can go get fucked. That's basically what it is, And now I feel like I have myself a lot more like caring about other people and wanting to get involved in a lot more than I did, rather than just sit in my room or go to the casino and sit in my car and smoke pipes till I could get to inside, and everyone would be like, "You coming inside?" And I'd be like, 3 hours later, I'm like, "Yep, in a minute." You know what I mean? It controlled me, So
I don't have any experience with that, but my guess would be that when you said I've had enough, it was more than just saying I'm going to put down something bad. It's kind of like saying I'm going to decide to live.
Yep.
Because continuing, you would have died. Probably.
Yep. Probably.
And so you actually were saying like, no, I choose life.
Yep.
And choosing life means a lot more than just like bumbling along to the finish line. Choosing life means like, what the fuck is life? And why should it matter? Why? Because you decided it matters. Of course, your son is a major element of that life, but it also sounds like you're like, I want to get involved in things that are creative. I want to create. I don't want to destroy. I
was in a band at the time, and I lost the band too because of it. You know what I mean? And that band was everything to me. So the band that's launching now, coming up next week, is the first time I'll be launching a band since 2014, which was when I had my meth addiction. So it's been a long time, and I'm very nervous about it, but I'm very excited about it.
Oh, I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy that you kicked that. Good for you, man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Never go backwards.
No, I never will, man, because I know that I'm always going to be an addict. I'm always going to be a meth addict, and I've got to stay away from that because it wouldn't take me long to get back into the swing of things. You know what I mean? So
what that chemical wants from you, right?
That's a problem with Australia, man. We're saturated in methamphetamine at the moment. Yeah. Like, it's a big problem. It's a huge, huge problem. I mean, Alan can testify to that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whatever. In the States, it's really the middle of our country has a big problem with it.
Yeah, is that places like Ohio and things like that?
Yep. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, less so on the coasts for some reason. Maybe it's because we income is different or something. I don't know, but it's meth is a really big problem in the middle of the country. Yeah.
I think it's a big problem worldwide, but it's just it's like it's becoming more and more prevalent every day. So
I hear people talk about it. And you know what? What's interesting about meth is, again, I'm so stupid when it comes to it, but I meet people who are like, hey, I'm a recovering meth addict, and I'm like, I would not have guessed, because you think of like the profile of a meth addict is maybe like has like teeth problems, or a crack addict you can spot, right? But for some reason, like I'm like, wow, really? You were addicted to meth? And they're like, yeah.
Well, I have huge teeth problems, and that's one thing that I've got to obviously save and fix. Like, it's a very expensive thing to get your teeth fixed. You know what I mean? And it's one of the things that I have the most problem with my confidence with. It's like destroyed my confidence completely with my teeth problems and things like that. But meth really it's a killer of a drug, man. It's probably one of, if not the worst, one of the worst. You know what I mean? Like,
what's interesting about the so I'm on the other side of my addiction, but I've still got like this noose around my neck a little bit from when I was making bad decisions. Like the same thing with being fat. Like, so I mentioned, you know, kind of a little bit of the shame of like the old videos. I remember when John, bless him, he gained all of his weight back, but he had lost a lot of his weight. And he had all this excess skin, and it was just kind of like excess skin for people who lose a lot of weight is kind of like a, you know, it's like a cross for us to bear. I don't know, like there's at a certain point you kind of like, you kind of have to embrace it as a totem of overcoming your problem.
Definitely. Well, man, we've gone over time, and I appreciate you taking the time. I don't want to keep you going because, you know, otherwise we'll be sitting here for 3 hours, and I know it's kind of getting probably late in your household at the moment. But we want to thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. We really, really appreciate it. And we'd love to have you back, maybe even with EJ sometime or something like that. We'd love to collaborate again if you're obviously down for it.
Yeah, well, if you guys come up with a fun project in the future or something, or at least, you know, share with us your music when this new band gets up and running. And yeah, I'm so happy for you, and it was great meeting you both and chatting about movies. And thanks for caring. You know, thanks for watching our channel and for caring about what we're up to way over here.
Man, trust me. Every time you read our cat, you might even see me a couple of times. I was the first comment once on one of your videos recently about Tom Ye West drums, and it said first. Like that, I just as a joke, I never do that, you know. But I was like, I'm always up at that time, usually like working on music video, doing whatever, and I'll see it come on. I'll be like, oh, cool, new red out. Like straight away, I click it. You know what I mean?
Here's some inside baseball for you. I don't schedule those posts. I get up in the morning. I work from home 4 days a week. I go to the elliptical first thing in the morning. And I know almost always with sweaty hands, like barely able to use the touchscreen because I got these soaking wet, disgusting sweaty hands. I post, you know, because I have them locked and loaded, and I post the video. So normally the schedule is like record the video on Thursday and then have all the clips and thumbnails and all the bullshit, you know, ready by Tuesday or Wednesday. And then that gives me like a week and a half to edit whatever's going on the other channel. But I would love to make you had asked like what else is going on. Somehow, some way, I don't see a clear way to it with fatherhood and with 2 YouTube channels and all the rest of it and a full-time job. But yeah, I think it's going to be time for another narrative feature film in the next couple of years, probably.
Awesome. I look forward to it, man. And again, thank you. And everyone, if you haven't gone and checked out Red Cow Arcade, you can go check them out at www.youtube.com/@redcowarcade. Or you can go to redcowentertainment.com and check that out as well and get a better picture of what more they do other than just podcast discussions. So again, thank you, Frankie. You're a legend. And I'm stoked that you came on and gave us a chance to interview you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you.